Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.
These are tough times, and they're getting even tougher. The clock is ticking. The countdown to collapse is well underway. What are you going to do about it? Will you just wait for it to happen, or will you be ready when it happens? The decision is yours, and yours alone. Join myself, Mickey Fulp, Robert Ian, David Morgan, Jeff Berwick, Elijah Johnson, Alan Butler, Gregory Manarino, Daniel Amaduri, Andy Hoffman, Tekoa Da Silva, Trace Mayer, one of the world's leading Bitcoin authorities, Bix Weir, Jay Taylor, and Gary Christensen at the Liberty Mastermind Symposium in Las Vegas on February 21st and 22nd, and learn how to create your plan to survive the collapse. The last Liberty Mastermind Symposium was one of the most highly rated conferences ever, and this one promises to be even better. Don't miss it. Join us and register now at libertymastermind.us. libertymastermind.us. This one is going to be out of this world, and it's going to be even better because it's in Las Vegas, Nevada. Go to Liberty US and sign up today. You are listening to the FinancialSurvivalNetwork.com. I'm Kerry Lutz on 1230 WBZT. No doubt you're well familiar with our frequent guest and contributor, John Rubino, co-authored the book Dollar Collapse, The Coming Dollar Collapse with James Turk. Got a new book coming out real soon. In fact, in the next week, I think. The Money Bubble. He's with us now. John, welcome back.
Hey, Kerry. Great to be back.
Hey, so this is pretty cool. I think it's going to be as timely as the last book, and certainly it is topical. And what's it about?
Well, it's about how the 2008 crash should have ended the era of fiat currency. You know, we should have really had the monetary reset then that normally comes after building up insane amounts of debt and trying to finance it with borrowed money and on top of borrowed money. But it didn't happen. The governments of the world just decided to run the printing presses and try to bail us out of the debt that we've taken on over the last 30 years with more currency creation and even more debt. And they succeeded in one sense, that we avoided a 1930s style depression, but at the cost of another 30 or so trillion dollars of debt piled onto what was already an unmanageable debt burden. So now we've raised the stakes and basically created the conditions in which an even bigger crash is completely inevitable. So this book is about the process that led up to this point and where we go from here. And where we go from here is a fascinating question because there are a lot of potential courses for the global economy to take, starting with, debt that equals 400% of GDP. You know, it could be an Austrian economics crack-up boom, or it could be a Kondratiev winter where we just collapse under the weight of all of it. And it could be several other things. And there's no real way to know for sure where we go from here and how it progresses. But we know something chaotic is coming. So the question is, how do you prepare for bad times when the bad times are in terms of their details hard to predict? So that's what the book is about. You know, how do you decide which scenario is most likely and how do you prepare for it?
Yeah, that is the question. And what are your thoughts here? Obviously, you've got a thesis lined up and expounded upon in the book, or probably several scenarios, right? And what's the most likely one, in your opinion?
We have decided to try door number 2, which is hyperinflation. You know, instead of just collapsing under the weight of all of our debt, we're trying our best to lower the value of the world's major fiat currencies, and in that way try to make our debts less onerous and get us out from under it. Now, that historically that has failed miserably. You know, Weimar Germany and about 1,000 other periods of currency destruction have happened in history, and there's never been a time when a society took on way too much debt and then was able to get out from under it painlessly. So we're doing our best to engineer a dramatic decrease in the value of the world's fiat currencies. So assuming that we succeed, and I think there's a pretty good chance that we will succeed because printing presses are basically unlimited with fiat currencies. There's nothing backing the dollar. It's all just make-believe. So you can, if you want to create $1 trillion, you just type that in and press send. If you want to create $10 trillion, you do the same. And so these guys have shown up till now that they really don't have any limit. There's no limit on what they're willing to create in terms of new currency. And so if one number isn't big enough, the next number will be 5 times that, and they'll try that. And so at some point, they will have created enough new currency to dramatically lower the value of the existing currency that's out there, and we'll get some kind of an aggressive inflation. It might be the Austrian economics crack-up boom, where people just finally realize that the stated explicit policy of their government is to make their currency worth less and less each year and then just lose faith in the currency. They all dump it at the same time. Everybody heads for the exit at once by converting their currency into real stuff. And you get the price of real things going through the roof, which is the same thing as saying the value of the currency is going through the floor. Something like that is probably out there based on policies as they're now in place. So at some point, not just the dollar, but also the euro, the yen, and the concept of fiat currencies will be called into disrepute, and we'll have a monetary reset where our currencies stop working and we have to go back to sound money, which is what happens every single time, at least in the past, that something like this has been tried. So we'll end up using gold and silver, or maybe bitcoins or its successor or something like that as money 5 years from now, to replace the fiat currencies that we've destroyed.
And you really think it's that simple, though? Because it should have happened before. I mean, that's what we were all waiting for. That's what we all thought was going to happen, and yet it didn't. I mean, we all took a credibility hit from that one, didn't we?
Yeah, we really did. 2008 definitely seemed like the end of this process. But, if you're a family and you one of you loses a job and you max out a bunch of credit cards to maintain your lifestyle, you didn't save yourself. You didn't fix anything. You just piled a bunch more debt on yourself. And at some point, your family crisis becomes even bigger than it would have been. And so that's basically what we've done as a global financial system. We've all just taken on so much more debt that our situation is even more hard to manage now than it was back in 2008. So all we've really done is set the stage for another big crisis. And you're right that the fact that 2008 wasn't the definitive crisis, the end of the road, means that it's hard to predict when the end of the road comes. But an extra $30 trillion or so brings it that much closer. So I think that the numbers are so insane by this point that when things do start to fall apart, that will be the end. That people will finally figure out that you can't give the government a printing press and expect it to behave in a way that leads to sustainable growth for as far as the eye can see. They will abuse it, and that will bring about a crisis that ends with the printing press being taken away from them. So we're heading for it, and whether it's this year, next year, or 5 years from now is completely unpredictable. And what happens in those intervening years is also unpredictable. But the fact that the end game is the destruction of these fiat currencies and their replacement with something that works better, which historically has been gold and silver, that's pretty much baked into the cake.
So you just can't trust the government no matter what, is what you're telling me? Like I didn't know this already, huh, John?
Well, you can't trust people with too much power. We're infinitely corruptible. And if you give anyone too much power, they become something very different than they were. And governments are the perfect example of this. If you give someone life or death power over his political enemies, he will eventually use it. If you give a bunch of elected officials and their appointed bureaucrats the power to create money going into every election cycle, of course they're going to do it. Of course they're going to do what they have to do to get themselves elected next time around. And since there's always an election coming up, there is always going to be too much money created. And in the aggregate, that money eventually reaches a point where it destabilizes the society. And this has happened to the Roman Empire. It happened to France twice in the 1700s. It happened to Weimar Germany and dozens of other countries throughout history who tried to do something like this. China had paper money for a little while, and they abused it, and they had a hyperinflation, and they went back to gold and silver. The U.S. had a paper currency briefly during the Revolutionary War, and they inflated it away to nothing. There was even a saying, "Not worth the Continental," because the currency was called the Continental. And we are no different from those previous cultures, except that we can make our mistakes on a vastly bigger scale because we have a completely fiat currency that's not based on anything. We have global telecommunications. We have a global financial system that is all interlinked. So every country in the world right now is running a fiat currency, and the vast majority of those countries are abusing that printing press. So it's not just one country anymore. The past hyperinflations have been localized. One country screwed up, but the rest of the world was using more or less sound money. Well, this time nobody's using sound money. Everybody is using fiat currencies, and they're all abusing that privilege. They've all been corrupted by that power. So what we're going to get is completely predictable based on history in one sense. We'll screw up our currencies and have a period of chaos and then go back to sound money. But again, the details, because this is uncharted territory in the sense that we're now a global economy rather than a bunch of local economies. The details are very hard to predict. And they could range from fairly benign, where we all just, via the internet, educate ourselves about money and insist that we go back to something sound, or at the other end of the spectrum, we have just global chaos where we've got wars going on all over the place and hyperinflations of various degrees in different countries and hot money flowing from one place to another and destabilizing the few countries that are well managed. And that's also a very real possibility. And that sort of feels like today. We're in the beginning stages of that.
Oof. Does it ever? My goodness. It just looks like we have the worst of all possible worlds now, John, doesn't it?
Well, we've got a lot of problems, Kerry, that's for sure. And you can trace them back to the fact that we put unlimited printing presses in the hands of people who have been corrupted by them. So, so many of the problems that we don't really normally think of as economic can be traced back to it. Like, for instance, the surveillance state in the U.S. Our need for this kind of constant surveillance and the Patriot Act's ability to just pick up American citizens and disappear them if we want to, that can be traced back to the fact that we were able to use our printing press for the world's reserve currency to build a military empire that spans the world and has made enemies everywhere. We're so cocky because we can afford a military that dwarfs everybody else's put together that we go around bullying people and invading whoever we feel like invading and intimidating the rest. And that has created enemies all over the world. Now that process has come back to haunt us. The enemies are attacking us at home and causing us to panic and create basically a police state. And so you can trace the police state back to the printing press. And we can name just about any other problem that we have and do the same thing. We can trace it back to the fact that the government is able to create as much money as it wants to and is doing so and distorting markets and generally causing trouble in places where it really doesn't belong and where it shouldn't even be intervening in the first place.
Huh. Yeah, boy, is that the truth. So, hey, you know what this reminds me of? Putting these sociopaths in charge of the printing press reminds me of these chain letters. The guys that get into the chain letter first, clean clock, make hundreds of thousands of dollars, and all the suckers that get in later, they all get taken to the cleaners. We're living in the chain letter economy, John. That's what it comes down to.
Well, yeah. A fractional reserve banking system with a fiat currency is, in a sense, a chain letter, because they create this currency and they give it to the big banks, who then give it to their major clients. And these guys get to use the money before it is depreciated by being tossed out into the system and making, every other piece of currency less valuable. So they get all the benefit from it. So another of today's ills is the huge disparity between rich and poor. And that can be directly traced back to the fact that the rich guys get to use the money first. So, yeah, just like a chain letter, where the first people who get into it make money, and the people who get the letter later tend to be the ones who finance the guys who got in first. And so we've got working class people, the 99% really, so working class and middle class and formerly middle class people basically financing the 1% now via the printing press and fractional reserve banking. So the question is really, when do people figure this out? Because it's not clear to the average person that this is what's going on. They all are able to look at some perceived enemy, somebody who is doing things that hurts them, but they don't understand how that person is able to do that. And once we get to the root of it.
I'm sorry, I'm just laughing, but we're going to talk more about this up next. I'm excited about the Money Bubble book coming out next week from James Turk and John Rubino on the financialsurvivalnetwork.com, 1230 WBZT. Hi, it's Kerry Lutz. I recently decided to move my retirement account into physical precious metals to hedge against the coming times. If you want to move an existing retirement account into physical precious metals that you can hold in your hand, tax-free, there's no company that can do it more quickly and efficiently than Regal Assets. It took them just 24 hours to open my new IRA account, and all I had to do was fill out one simple form. The best part is that Regal Assets does all the work for you. They cover the setup and administrative costs for 2013. If you're interested in making the same move I did, call 855-678-6620, 855-678-6620. That's 855-678-6620, or visit them at regalassets.com. You'll be glad you did, and tell them Kerry sent you. We're back with John Rubino on the financialsurvivalnetwork.com, 1230 WBZT. So, yeah, people, I think, are waking up and figuring this thing out. You can only make them hate each other for so long until one day they wake up and say, why did I really hate that guy? But hating the government is one thing that we all have in common, I hope. And, even the people that are dependent, even if you are dependent upon the government for your sustenance, you hate them all the more because you hate whoever you're dependent upon. Take it from me. My kids hated me for a long time while they were dependent upon me, right? No one despises you more than your kids when they're dependent upon you. Then when they get out on their own, becomes a different story.
Yeah, they'll appreciate you once you become free babysitting. So. Yeah,
and free dog sitting, right, John?
Yeah, and like now, huh? Yeah. Yeah.
But
people, especially the people who are dependent on the government, and which is a huge segment of American society now. It's something like 1 in 4 people, or 1 in 3 people, are on the dole in one way or another in the U.S. And so in one sense, you see the government as having your back, helping you get through the week, and then you look at the corporate executives and hedge fund guys and everything, and then you see them as the enemy, but you don't see that it's really all one big organization. The government and the big banks
are basically... Difference? What's the difference?
They are really just different departments in a large organization that is now motivated to grow and to accumulate more and more power rather than to help the people that they used to help. There was a time when banks were supposed to serve their customers. And little local banks still do, but the big 5 or 6 banks that dominate the U.S. financial system are so far removed from the average customer that it's not even an issue anymore. That's the average person goes to Citigroup or someplace like that and is treated like a number and is really not seen as valuable in any way. And they get that, but they don't get that you can trace the fact that the big banks keep on getting bigger and bigger back to the fact that the government can just toss money created out of thin air at these big banks. And so, Kerry, you're doing your best to educate people about this. But I think the process is still in its early stages, and it's got a long way to go. Ron Paul did a great job in the last few years, and there are other voices in the sound money community, but it's still really a marginalized idea, and it has to become mainstream before fundamental change happens.
Yeah, I don't know if you watched Mike Maloney's, history of money. He did a great job. He's still putting it out. Last time I looked, 5 parts, and it's all stuff that I learned in college and my economics courses. But he's talking about how the Federal Reserve just prints up money out of thin air, and what a novel concept this is. And of course, you and I, John, have known this, since our childhood, since college. But most of the country, most of the world doesn't understand the way a bank, you go to borrow money and they just create the money because, they just deposit the money to your account in that bank. They don't take it out of another account and loan the money to you. They increase their aggregate deposits on deposit in that bank.
Yeah.
I hope I'm making sense to you out there.
Fractional reserve banking is a really fascinating subject in itself, and combined with a fiat currency, that really explains where we are today. So, we should do a whole show on that sometime, Kerry, where we walk people through how it works, how a bank can just create money out of thin air, and how all that money can just disappear when things turn down. That's
right. When a bunch of loans go south, that money, all of a sudden the reverse happens, that they can loan out. If there's just a 10% reserve requirement, they can increase that 900%, the amount of money that's being held in the aggregate by a group of banks. And then when those loans go south, all of a sudden, whoa, that money just disappeared, and they're left holding 1% of the money they were holding 5 minutes ago when those loans were on the books. Man, that's what happened in 2008. And that's what you don't really understand, and what was never explained. And Congress didn't understand it. They had to go to prison to go talk to Martin Armstrong for him to give him a primer on fractional reserve banking, for them to say, oh, is that what happened? And those are your leaders making policies and telling you, here's what the country needs to be doing. I mean, come on.
Yeah. See, that's where these booms and busts come from. They're not acts of nature or something that's just randomly generated. They come from fractional reserve banking, which gives us a quote unquote elastic, flexible
currency
money supply. Yeah, and so that means we can have huge increases in the money supply, and then it can collapse back down to just the level of base money. And
it's important to realize that we did have booms and busts before we had fiat currencies, but you couldn't have multiple bubbles being blown in different sectors of the economy before fiat currency, because you still had tulip mania, you had the South Sea bubble, you had the Louisiana land purchase. You just got to read Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds to know that we've always had enthusiasm and irrational exuberance. You just couldn't have so much of it at one time without fiat currency. It's impossible. So you get a bust, and then it gets wrung out of the system, and life goes on, but not with central banks acting as a counterbalance and trying to put off the day of reckoning indefinitely. That's the danger. That's what it really comes down to. And I hear you're babysitting there. Your words are getting out of control.
Yeah, they want in badly.
Yeah, they want in.
Yeah. So, sorry about the background noise there, but they're great dogs, but they don't understand my job.
Yeah, they don't care either.
No,
they don't care, and they're never going to. So, on that note, John, hey, tell us your website. I assume the book will be available there, probably on Amazon and other places upon its imminent release.
Yeah, it'll be up once it's released. It's and I run dollarclaps.com, which is a website that's updated daily that covers the stuff we just talked about. And the book will be out by New Year's for sure, and probably before that. So I'll come back on, Kerry, if you'll have me, and we can talk about it once it's out.
Absolutely, I'm looking forward to writing a real good review on it because hey, this is what we talk about every day on financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Don't forget Liberty Mastermind, February 21st, 22nd. Looking forward to having you there. And sign up, libertymastermind.us. John, we will talk with you again real soon. Great luck on the book. And I'm sure it's must reading, and I'm going to be reading it. And hopefully shortly after the first of the year, I will have my review up on your site and on Amazon as well.
Awesome, Kerry. Thanks. Talk to you soon.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
You too.
The Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.